As it happens, there are lots of things that we can do with strings in Scala. We want to cover a few of them, look at some of the different methods, so that you have the ability to do things that are more interesting than maybe what we've been able to do previously. Because this is really going to be kind of what will set Scala apart from being just a calculator for you. So we can see some of the methods that are available on string just by using tab completion. So if I put in a string and dot and hit tab, I can see a number of the different methods that exist here. Other things that we can do with strings, if I actually put that in, actually let's go with a longer string. Right there. So you can get individual characters by putting an index in parentheses, and the indices start at 0. So res sub 0, or res 1 sub 0 is that first H, sub 1 is the I, sub 2 would be the space, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 would be the final E. If you go out of bounds, if you try to pull something negative, or you try to pull in 8, we can try that, we'll get an error for it because we've gone out of bounds. We can also ask where something is inside of a string. So, and we can do that with the index of method. This is one of the highly useful methods on a string. So if I take that res1 again, and I do the index of H, I get that it's located at 0. You'll note that it gives us the first one. If I wanted the last index, I can call last index of. If I go for T, I get the T that's in the middle for the there. I can also look for, I'd get the same index if I look for TH because it starts at the same location. Another method that is useful, and this method actually comes in two flavors, is substring. So the first version of substring, let's pull that back up. I can call substring and pass it just one argument. So let's say I pass it the argument 3. And what that does is it gives me everything from the character at the third index on. So once again, the T is at the third index, so I get from there to the end of the string. I can also pass substring a 2-argument version, and the second argument is going to be the index just past the last character. So this is actually a standard thing when you're indexing into things. You'll often start, it's inclusive on the starting edge and exclusive on the ending edge. So if that's 3, 4, 5, I'm going to go for 6, and that'll just pull the word the out of there. Previously, when we talked about operators, it was noted that 4 plus 5 is actually short for 4 dot plus 5, and that you could leave off the dot in the parentheses. Well, this first version here, because it only takes one argument, turns out we can do the exact same thing. I don't recommend doing this. It can become harder to read over time, but you should be aware that it's possible. In the case where we have 2 arguments, we can leave off the dot. If you kind of want to, you can put another space in there to create some symmetry. Once again, I think that this can cause issues with readability, but it's something that the Scala syntax will allow. Another thing that's nice to be able to do is to break a string in 2. So we can take our res1 and call a method split at and say I want to split at index 2. And split at returns a tuple. So the tuple will have everything before that index and then everything after that index. So if I call it with 3, I get high space and then there, as opposed to high and then space there. One of the things about this is because we have these spaces, we might not want them. Another very helpful method on a string is called trim. So res17 dot, and I want to pull out the high. So dot underscore 1 gets the high. But then I want to trim that, T-R-I-M. And it turns out this does not have the space. We can prove that by asking for the length of the string, and it only has 2. So I want to use these methods, and I want to write a little bit of code where I have a name, and I want to split that name up into a first name and a last name. Or maybe I want to build a name, instead of being in first last, I want it to be last comma first. So how could I do that? Well, the first thing I need to know is where to split it at. And that will vary by what name. You know, we could, in this case, because I've just created this, do 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey, that's it. This is at index 4, because the indexes start at 0. And say, I just want to break things up there. The problem with that is that it wouldn't work for any other input. And so by using index of, we can make something, a set of instructions that works for any name we want to pass in, so that I can take this, we'll give it its own name, space index is that. Now how can I pull off the two names? One way would be to use substring. So I can get the last name by taking name dot substring of space index, and I'm going to say space index plus 1 here because I don't want to get the space. That gives me the last name. And if I wanted this to be in a string with the first name, I could then take name dot substring from 0 to space index. Here, remember, the far end is exclusive, so it won't actually pull the space in, and we get it reversed. What would be another way to do this? Well, the split method can be helpful here. So I can say val first last equals, and I'm using the split method, and I'm also using the pattern matching on a tuple, name dot split at space index, and that will create split at space index, and that will give me two variables. Note that the last name has a space on it because of where I split this. So when I build up my result, I actually want to trim that off so that I don't have it there. And then I can do that. I could also do this with string interpolation. Now because I am doing last.trim, I'll put curly braces around that. And we can build the same string. So that gives you an introduction to a number of the different methods that you have on strings, and we'll come back in the next video and look at some other operations that we have and some of the details of strings that are important.